Chris used a term that I've used about Warner too, which is called the albatross. And albatross is, this thing around your neck that constantly driving you nuts and never helps you, right? I think it was Rime of the Ancient Mariner where that book was, the albatross was from. But the reality is Warner has never made anybody any money ever since the old days, since Stephen Ross started it, And so every buyer of Warner Brothers has regretted it. And I think the buyer of Warner Brothers here will ultimately regret paying what they're paying for this, because this is really a battle for control of the last piece of asset, on the monopoly board of Hollywood. And it's a pretty good asset, but it's a difficult one at best. And Netflix didn't need it. But the last thing they were going to do was cede all those assets to Paramount and really create a real competitor to them by letting Zaslav and Ellison team up against Netflix. So in the end, now they're both paying a ton for it. The Netflix deal is better structured and it has much lower cost of capital and it involves stock. And I think it's just a better deal for.
And they're not getting those legacy. They wouldn't be getting the legacy TV networks.
Yeah,
either.
You don't get the legacy cable. The only reason Ellison wants the legacy cable is to shut down CNNs for Trump. And so that's kind of behind the scenes of all this is this battle for CNN. And, the truth is Hastings is a Democrat and Netflix is more of a liberal company. And so, they want to save CNN the way it is and just not be dealing with this. That's not their business. Where Ellison really has more than just money on his mind here. This is about power. And certainly that's where the support from the Trump administration comes for the Ellison bid, is because he wants to kill CNN.
So
go ahead.
Well, Ross, we only have a few minutes, so I want to make sure we get all our questions in. On the Netflix side of things, if Netflix doesn't succeed in getting this, is that seen, in your view, as ultimately a win for shareholders? After all, Netflix shares are lower after making this bid for Warner Brothers Discovery.
I've made a lot of money in Netflix stock over the last decade, and I love the company, and I think it's one of the best assets you could own. But we sold some of our Netflix when this deal went down because the valuation of Netflix is predicated on the business model that they have today. And by buying Warner's, if they succeed, it changes the business model. And I think they deserve a lower PE ratio if they're going to be a traditional studio with all this clunkiness and also lack of clarity of what that future brings. Now, they can make great movies and it's a huge success, or they can make crap and it's a big loss, But we saw what happened at Disney after they absorbed Fox. It was much harder than anybody thought to make this profitable. And now they finally are getting it together. This is years later. So I always thought that Netflix was just bidding it up so that, Ellison would just overpay substantially for this asset and be stuck with it in the end, and then Netflix wins anyways. And that's what ultimately, if Ellison wants the asset, he's going to have to pay $10 billion more for it, and that's the only way Warner Brothers will go for this. And so I do actually expect them to do that at some point. And then if Netflix loses, they really win, and that would bring the stock price back back to 120 and all that kind of stuff. But it would also be great for their overall business because they wouldn't have to put all this capital to work at much lower returns.
So, Ross, do you expect, one more offer from Paramount? Another higher offer? And then that's it? And then Netflix says, I'm out?
Well, I think that, they got, Daddy Ellison to sign off and say, I'll pay for this if my kid actually gets this deal. Not just say I'm going to pay for it, I'm actually going to pay for it. And then secondly, what's another $10 billion to the Ellisons? When you're worth hundreds of billions of dollars, another $10 billion is I don't know, a pizza, cost to them. So I think the real issue is they're vastly overpaying for the asset, even at $100 billion. So it's just like $10 billion down the drain that goes to Zaslav. And boy, these payoffs that Zaslav and the executives getting are for hundreds of millions of dollars. So something's going to happen. And I just don't see Ellison going away that easy. And I think Netflix would be satisfied with them vastly overpaying and walking away. Hey. But we'll see. I've been wrong. I was wrong about this in the beginning because I didn't think Netflix would bid. But we'll see how badly Netflix really wants to win versus just win the game of business.
Can I ask you, and maybe this is something that's certainly, of course, near and dear to our hearts as we are in the media and news business, and that has changed dramatically over the last 10, 20 years. And I just do wonder how this plays out and what it means for these cable news channels or even these network channels where it does seem like they are being even politicized more than ever. It's not just kind of the venue of cable, but we're now seeing kind of regular linear really being politicized. The problems in that as we think about the importance of news and media in our world. Or is it not so important because everybody's on social media, although that has its problems too?
Right. So, you know where a lot of people are watching your Bloomberg is on YouTube. And I know you guys have a YouTube channel that's very active because I get all these alerts of every time you post my stuff on YouTube. And we all know that media organizations are smart to be reposting stuff on YouTube because that's where people are watching. And by that matter, I'm a big Google investor as well.
Yeah.
But I think when you look at people my age or below, the way people consume media is 100% different, news media, than my age or above. You know, so my mom is still watching CNN, you know, but nobody I know who is younger watches CNN unless they're in an airport. So that's when I get most of the calls from my friends is when I'm on CNN is when they're in the airport. And they're like, oh, I saw you in the airport. You know, and I'm like, wow, that's great. And the other place I'm really popular is in gyms and country clubs where they still watch CNBC or have it on. But in real life, when I'm on a YouTube show, 100 people are like, oh, I saw your YouTube show and da-da-da-da-da. So the world has changed and the media landscape is changing. Cable is dead. It's just a dying thing. So if I'm a news organization, I have to repurpose my content for social media and have 5 or 6 different platforms that I'm putting out my content. And then I'll get the result that I want by having enough views. But just being on cable TV is...
So Russ, we only have 30 seconds left and then we're going to do some news and then we'll come back and get more time with you on Tesla. But if that's the case, then what happens if Paramount doesn't get the bid, Netflix does? What happens to the cable assets, very briefly?
Well, it'll be spun off like Versant, and Versant is the Comcast cable assets, and you know where that goes, where these ships with no future go. I don't know, but it's smart for those companies to jettison those declining yet profitable assets because in 5 years, maybe less, they'll probably be worth almost nothing.